Americans have begun stocking up or bulk buying daily necessities amid
They
concern.
anticipate higher prices in the near future due to the sweep.
And everything is increasing, has been, and continue to go up.
Worried a new iPhone would soon cost twice as much or more.
As the world's leading superpower pulls back from decades of globalization, uncertainty looms large over the global economy. Amid this shifting landscape, Chinese President Xi Jinping has embarked on his first overseas trip of 2025, visiting Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia. These three countries aren't just close neighbors of China, they're also key players in ASEAN, the Southeast Asian bloc that's been China's largest trading partner for the past 4 years. So how does this trip connect to China's push to cushion the blow from rising US tariffs? And what does it reveal about Beijing's broader aspirations for regional partnerships? In this episode of Deep Dive, my colleague Zhao Yunfei joins us from Kuala Lumpur to unpack what President Xi's Southeast Asia tour signals about the future of China's economic and trade strategy. It's Thursday, April 17th. Yunfei, welcome back to the show from the tropical Kuala Lumpur. And let's cut to the chase. What do you think are the biggest achievements of President Xi's trip to Malaysia so far?
Well, there are a lot of achievements. I would say that you mentioned about tropical. Certainly, the weather over here is really hot. And, not only in terms of the temperature, but also in terms of the scale of, welcome. I have been in many international, airports welcoming President Xi, but I would say that this is one of the largest scale of welcoming for the Chinese president that I have ever been to. For example, I was at the airport when they were receiving President Xi. There was a team with more than 300 people, and there was a high school band. There is a welcoming crowd, and there are a lot of folk dancers that doing the mix of cultural dancings, and also given the high level of the people. I just came back from the airport seeing President Xi off. He was just leaving Malaysia and heading to Cambodia, and Prime Minister of Malaysia Anwar Ibrahim was seeing him off from the airport. And this is also quite unique because given the fact that President Xi was here for 3 days, Prime Minister of Malaysia Anwar Ibrahim received President Xi from the airport on Tuesday, and on the entire day on Wednesday, he was with President Xi, both in the morning session when the King of Malaysia, His Majesty Sultan Ibrahim, was hosting a welcome ceremony to the Chinese president. The Prime Minister was there as well, including the afternoon session, where there's bilateral meeting between the Prime Minister and the Chinese president. And then the Prime Minister seeing him off on Thursday at the airport. So the entire 3 days, he was accompanying the Chinese president. So that was a really large scale of welcome as well as a scale in terms of reception.
So a lot of dancers, high school music band, and the Prime Minister was there to welcome President Xi and also to see him off personally at the airport. So that's quite a high-level welcoming for President Xi's first trip in over a decade. And why Malaysia is paying such high attention to President Xi's trip this time? What do you think are the reasons?
Well, you mentioned it. You mentioned it. That's over a decade. So
Right.
This is the second visit by the Chinese president in 12 years, the second visit. I spoke to a lot of people, including scholars and people on the street, and there are some people really tell me that really that was been 12 years, and this is way overdue.
Doesn't feel
He's
like that
supposed
long.
to be here. It doesn't feel that long because remember last time he was here, there was an upgrade of the relationship. So this time, President Xi was here, after 12 years, and he also published an article saying that last trip really gave him a great, impression. So the way how people here say that this is overdue is not complaining. This is the way how they express that, hey, we have a very close bond between China and Malaysia, and certainly we're close neighbors. So he's totally welcome to visit this beautiful country.
Yeah. And you were there actually before President Xi arrived in Malaysia. And so, what's your personal impression of the tropical country? How did you like it?
Oh, speaking of the weather, I think it's quite different from Beijing because it could
Definitely.
rain at any time. It doesn't have any prediction because when we live in Beijing, there's a period of time when there's a prediction of rain, and then over here it rains suddenly. When we were receiving the Chinese president at the airport, uh, just 20 minutes before his arrival, it was rain heavily.
Hmm.
And 1 hour before that, there's clear sunny sky. So it's
Wow.
it's really different from hour to hour. But luckily, when the Chinese president arrived at the airport, it was drilling a little bit and then really cool down the weather a little bit so that people are enjoying the temperature at the same time, not affected by the rain.
So, very unpredictable weather. And earlier this month, you published an article called Twin Parks Shared Dreams and How Malaysia and China Are Building the Future Together on the local newspaper, The Star. So, why did you choose that specific topic? I mean, what was your thought process when you decided to go from that angle?
Because that's how the cooperation project got started between the two countries. It got started with industrial cooperation
Hmm.
and infrastructure cooperation. The twin parks, one part was in China, the China-Malaysia Qinzhou Industrial Park. Another part is in Malaysia,
Hmm.
the Malaysia-China Kuantan industrial park. So this is a really, industrial-based cooperation. And now they're expanding to the infrastructure level. They have the East Coast rail link that really goes through the industrial park and really upgrade the infrastructure of the city of Kuantan in general, just to make the industrial park as a point get connected uh, to the other parts of the world, especially going over to China. So there's only not only a linkage of the railroad infrastructure, but also the sea infrastructure, but also the port infrastructure,
Hmm.
the connection between Kuantan and the port of Qingzhou. So certainly now this is a infrastructure cooperation. And this time, President Xi's visit has really upgraded the level of cooperation really to the next level.
Hmm.
The two sides signed cooperation documents. I did a rough count. About 30 documents on Thursday was being about 30 documents was being signed on Wednesday.
Hmm.
And certainly, if you dive into the specific field of cooperation, it could be something really sensitive from artificial intelligence, the Beidou navigation system, to something really, leisure, from coconut to
Hmm.
panda research. So, it's really a wide range of cooperation field that also can give an idea that how the mutual trust between the two countries are really benefiting the people.
Right. So a lot of cooperation on the economic level. And from different aspect, some people might know that Malaysia actually has a very large and vibrant Chinese community. And the data that I have, the most recent data that I have, is that there were almost 7 million Chinese immigrants in Malaysia, and that accounts for roughly a quarter of the population in Malaysia back in 2020. Now, as you walk through the cities, the streets in Kuala Lumpur, do you see a lot of visible signs of Chinese culture, like language, food, businesses, restaurants, or even festivals?
Yeah, it's really easy to encounter some people speaking Chinese. Even the fact that the nationality of person is not Chinese, probably their ancestors are Chinese.
Right.
So certainly one of our drivers is actually Chinese, and his grandfather was Chinese. I asked him, okay, do you really see yourself got engaged because your nationality is Malaysia? He would tell me that I still eat Chinese food. So as you mentioned,
Hmm.
Chinese food is really popular on the
Right.
street. Also, I'm also amazed by the connection between the two sides because almost at every restaurant and convenience stores will be able to use the Alipay.
Hmm.
So there we don't need credit card anymore. when we are walking in the street. So you can see that it's really deeply embedded. The Chinese culture as well as the Chinese technology is deeply embedded. As President Xi himself really mentioned that China and Malaysia are neighbors across the sea. So certainly, this is perhaps the way how we explain that neighbors across the sea is simply because of the similar culture, the similar Asian value that we share, that can build a community, a peaceful development community within different cultures and different ethnicities.
So there's a lot of policies to help Chinese people coming to Malaysia. Like you mentioned, Alipay, you don't need to bring a credit card to Malaysia anymore for Chinese travelers. So these years, do you think there is a rise of Chinese nationals traveling to Malaysia in the recent years? And I'm not just talking about travelers, and perhaps also people, businessmen coming to Malaysia for investment.
Of course, when we talk about travelers, there's a visa-free program that is really, even before the visa-free program, there was already quite popular when people frequently travel to Southeast Asia countries. You know, the three countries that President Xi is visiting this time are very popular destinations to the Chinese travelers. So does the investment, just because of the similar value we share and the language that connected between the two countries, because a lot of time people can communicate in Chinese, so can make them communicate even more complicated topics because of the shared language, and that can help better promote the further investment of Chinese companies over here to Malaysia. I mentioned about the Alipay was
Yeah.
really successful case. So certainly, of course, there will be there's more signed documents being signed, including the Beidou navigation system, including the exchange in culture and movie, as well as you know AI perspectives. Certainly there will be more companies, Chinese companies, come over and invest in Malaysia. And I spoke with a guest, Parliament of Malaysia, a member of Malaysia Parliament, and he says that comparing to the other two countries President Xi has visited, um, Malaysia is comparatively a little bit more independent in terms of trading with China,
Hmm.
despite the fact that China is the top trading partner of Malaysia. So that also can give more opportunities for Chinese investments to come over and, settle down in Malaysia.
Yeah. So do you think Malaysia is positioning the country itself for Chinese nationals, especially under the frameworks like regional economic initiatives like the RCEP and the Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, because of the integration of the development plans, the development plans of both two countries really share the same, spirit. That's why how
Hmm.
it got better integrated. But I'd like to emphasize that um, Malaysia is not providing this opportunity uniquely for China. I think Malaysia really focus on diversity a
Hmm.
lot. So it's not only an opportunity for Chinese companies, but also they're really providing opportunities for many other countries in the region, and where Chinese companies is really grasping the opportunities over here. So we're seeing an increasing amount of Chinese investment over here, and it's also because of the uh, openness of the policy that can ensure that's happening, not just because of Malaysia is doing that uniquely for China. It's
Hmm.
just because of the trust,
Right.
because of the two countries.
Right. So Malaysia welcomes foreign capitals, businesses investing in the country, but at the same time, sounds like Chinese nationals are also quite willing to explore the market in Malaysia. And so, are Chinese products and brands common in Malaysia?
I would still want to emphasize I didn't go to the shopping mall quite often because
Right.
we're really busy with reporting. But certainly, I would say that when you want to check out from the convenience store, the Alipay, the technology exchanges is really, really popular.
Yeah. So, haven't got the time to browse the shopping mall yet. So,
Yeah,
hopefully someday in the future you can, yeah,
someday in
explore
the
these
future.
Chinese businesses, the presence of them in Malaysia. So now, after President Xi's first trip, after 12, over a decade. What can we expect from China-Malaysia cooperation and their partnership going forward in the future from now?
Well, because last year, the two countries celebrated the 50 years of ties between the two countries since they established diplomatic ties. And this time, President Xi's visit, he mentioned about the new golden next 50 years. So it's certainly opening a new chapter for the next 50 years. And it's a gold 50 years described by Chinese President Xi. But certainly, there's something beyond the previous cooperation. As I mentioned, it started from industrial cooperation, infrastructure cooperation, and then the next level from more cooperation that really build on mutual trust. For example, China wants to, strengthen security cooperation with Malaysia in the next step. So certainly, we're giving the bigger picture. China is really strengthening its relationship with neighboring countries because this time President Xi's trip abroad, this is his first trip of this year, overseas trip of this year, and then it came after a week after the work conference on the central conference on the work related to neighboring countries. So certainly China is really showing its dedication to fostering an amicable, secure, and prosperous neighborhood.
So the growing partnership between China and Malaysia and President Xi's trip to Malaysia this time is reflecting a larger pattern that China is strengthening its ties across countries in Southeast Asia. This is one of the stops for President's trip to Southeast Asia, first Vietnam, now Malaysia, and earlier today you were at the airport to see him off for him to start his trip to Cambodia. So, and China has been deepening its ties with the ASEAN countries. And what are the key drivers behind China's growing engagement with the regional bloc?
Well, I think if you see how this trip is being planned, it's interesting to see that Malaysia is the second stop of this trip. But what really makes Malaysia unique is its role. This year, Malaysia served as a rotating chair of ASEAN. So
Okay.
certainly, President Xi himself is suggesting that he hopes that Malaysia can work as a bridge between China and ASEAN. So play a pivotal role as a bridge that connecting China and ASEAN countries. So really, last time uh, when Malaysia worked as an ASEAN chair, Malaysia did do so, and better promoted cooperation with China. So certainly, there's a lot of anticipation between a further closer relationship between China and ASEAN itself, and also it's because of China really emphasizing its relationship with neighboring countries, and given the fact that I'm pretty sure that when this trip got arranged, there was not yet a tariff war at the moment.
Right.
But all of a sudden there was a crazy, leverage of tariff from the U.S. administration. But certainly now it turned the topic a little bit between the ASEAN countries with China on how to, better support, better frame a more resilient trade cooperation between the two sides.
Yeah, so this state visit is taking place coinciding with American administration's trade tariffs. We'll get to that topic deeper a bit later. But before that, among all these countries in ASEAN, so why these particular three countries, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia? Why choosing these three countries for President Xi's visit? What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, that's a great question. I think if you look at the three countries, and certainly Malaysia serve as the chair of ASEAN,
Right.
so certainly it's playing a pivotal role. Um, okay, the following is what I guess. I think that's a tough question. So, Vietnam, because it's a communist country, so certainly last time President Xi was visiting Vietnam was back in 2023, at the end of 2023. So certainly, President Xi wants to emphasize, strengthen its ties with, Communist Party country. And Cambodia, I think it's also a very key country when it comes to the South China Sea issues. I'm guessing because two sides have relatively agreement on the security issue in the South China Sea. So that's why the Chinese president is picking the other two countries. You probably want to turn to a more expert on this topic,
Right.
but certainly, yes, the reason why he wants to come to Malaysia is because Malaysia is the co-chair, is the chair of ASEAN.
Right. So, for this trip, President Xi's visit to the three countries might signal a turning point in China-ASEAN relations. And are we likely to see more integration in areas like infrastructure, digital economy, or people-to-people exchanges between China and ASEAN countries?
I think so. It's not just because of President Xi's visit, because when this time's visit, he really showing his anticipation and support to Malaysia serving as the chair of ASEAN. So certainly we will be able to see the next step of move, but also it comes amid the tariff
Right.
situation at this moment. So certainly um, a lot of the guests I spoke with, they say that the ASEAN countries should come together and come up with, a countermeasures, maybe not a strong countermeasures, but a relatively solution to the current situation. And one of the possible solution that they could do is, strengthening ties with China and doing more businesses with China. A lot of guests told me that China probably is not worried about the trade tensions because China has a really strong domestic market,
Hmm.
given the fact that the first quarter of China's GDP growth was 5.4%. That was a surprisingly high. But really, when it comes to countries in the Southeast Asia, the better way that they can striving their economy, one strategy is to um, advancing their trade. So when it comes to tariff, they really reduce the amounts, and that really can lead them to find alternatives.
So now on to this topic of tariffs. As you said earlier, President Xi's trip to these three ASEAN countries wasn't planned for US tariffs, but it just happens to coincide with the administration's announcement. And now we are seeing rising protectionism and trade tensions. And do you think China's deeper regional ties with the ASEAN countries is the country's response to the global fragmentation? And people might be worried, like, is China still willing for global free trade, or will China start to focus more on regional trade?
Well, yes and no. I think China wants to do both at the same time, even despite the fact there's no tariff. Certainly, this trip is being planned quite earlier because this is the
Right.
visit of the head of state. So certainly, even though there's no trade tensions, China do wants to expand its cooperation with neighboring countries because that's always been the Chinese diplomacy's priority. As I mentioned, the Central Conference on the work related to neighboring countries that is being held last week certainly stressed the importance of how China need to build an amicable situation with its neighboring countries. So it's there. And then it comes to the trade. And that can really give the urgency that how the East Asian countries should really work together to combat the current situation. When President Xi was hosted by the King of Malaysia, His Majesty Sultan Ibrahim, President Xi says that the two countries should jointly push forward the common development of the global south. See, so he mentioned about the global south. Even the fact that this is a bilateral meeting between China and Malaysia, President Xi still mentioned that it's important for the global south to get united. And the king says that Malaysia is dedicated to realizing the greater development of ASEAN-China relations.
So, as we record this conversation, President Xi has already finished his visit to Malaysia and has kicked off his visit to Cambodia. But my colleague Yunfei has finished his reporting duty in Malaysia and is ready to fly back. So, wish you a safe trip, safe flight back to Beijing. Thank you very much for your time, Yunfei.
Thank you for having me.
What's becoming clearer is that China is doubling down on its regional ties, strengthening both political and trade relationships within ASEAN. President Xi's message, published across major newspapers in all three countries, underscored a broader theme: unity brings strength, and only through cooperation can nations thrive together. From the Belt and Road Initiative to BRICS Plus and RCEP, China is positioning itself as a champion of multilateralism, offering development opportunities not just to its neighbors, but to the wider world. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Deep Dive. If you enjoyed what you just heard, don't forget to follow us on podcast platforms. Just search for Deep Dive. You can also leave a comment to let us know what you want to learn about China and beyond. This episode is brought to you by me, Li Yunqi, and my colleagues Zhang Zhang and Qi Zhi. Special thanks to CGTN reporter Zhao Yunfei. I'll see you in the next one.